we proceed into day 3 of analyzing Donald Trump's theoretically justifiable but horribly ill-timed dismissal of FBI Director James Comey, Charles Krauthammer weighed in his syndicated column on May 11th. The James Comey firing is hard to account for using traditional logic and reason. Vintage Trump, right? It was implausible that FBI Director James Comey was fired in May 2017 for actions committed in July 2016. The rationale contained in the memo by Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, which Trump, of course, contradicted the very next day. It was implausible that Comey was fired by Donald Trump for having been too tough on Hillary Clinton, as when, at that July news conference, he publicly recited her various email misdeeds despite recommending against her prosecution. It was implausible that Trump fired Comey for, among other things, reopening the Clinton investigation 11 days before the election, something that at the time Trump praised as a sign of Comey's guts that had brought back his reputation. It was implausible that Trump, a man notorious for being swayed by close and loyal personal advisors, fired Comey on the recommendation of a sub-cabinet official whom Trump hardly knew and who had been on the job all of 2 weeks. It was implausible that Trump found Rosenstein's arguments so urgently persuasive that he had acted immediately. So precipitously, in fact, that Comey learned of his own firing from TVs that happened to be playing behind him. These implausibilities were obvious within seconds of Comey's firing and the administration's immediate attempt to pin it all on the Rosenstein memo. That was pure spin. So why in reality did Trump fire Comey? Now, admittedly, Comey deserved to go. The cliche is that if you've infuriated both sides, it means you must be doing something right. Sometimes, however, it means you must be doing a lot of things wrong. Over the past year, Comey has been repeatedly wrong. Not, in my view, out of malice or partisanship, although his self-righteousness about his own probity does occasionally grate. He was in an unprecedented situation with unpalatable choices. Never in American presidential history had a major party nominated a candidate under official FBI investigation. This is why I say it was inconceivable to me that the Democrats would be stupid enough to nominate Hillary Clinton just on the grounds that she was a horrible, the worst imaginable candidate they could have nominated. And then you add the Emailgate investigation on top of it, and it was absolutely insane. And yet they did it anyway. Everybody's nuts. Or look at what my cap says. This is a good red cap, ladies and gentlemen. Turns out the Trump campaign was under investigation as well. God. Bipartisan insanity, ladies and gentlemen. Now that makes the normal injunction that FBI directors not interfere in elections facile and impossible to follow. Any course of action, disclosure or silence, commission or omission, carried unavoidable electoral consequences. Comey had to make up the rules as he went along, and he did. That was not his downfall. His downfall was making up contradictory, illogical rules, such as the July 5th non-indictment indictment of Mrs. Clinton. A series of these, and Comey became anathema to both Democrats and Republicans. Mrs. Clinton blamed her loss on 2 people. One of them was James Comey. And there's the puzzle. There was ample bipartisan sentiment for letting Comey go. And there was ample time from Election Day on to do so. We come back to this thing again. A simple talk, a gold watch, a friendly farewell, a Comey resignation to allow the new president to pick a new director. No fanfare, no answer. Or rancor, excuse me. Now, true, this became more difficult after March 20th when Comey revealed that the FBI was investigating the alleged Trump-Russia collusion. Difficult, but not impossible. For example, just last week, or week before last actually, Comey had committed an egregious factual error about the Huma Abedin emails that the FBI had to abjectly walk back in a written memo to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Here was an opportunity for a graceful exit. The last one, obviously. Comey regrets the mistake and notes that some of the difficult decisions he had previously made necessarily cost him the confidence of various parties. Time for a clean slate. Add the usual boilerplate about not wanting to be a distraction at such a critical time. Awkward, perhaps, but still dignified and amicable. Instead, we got this. A political axe murder. Brutal even by Washington standards. Or even Roman standards. I mean, where was the vein opening knife in the warm bath? No final meeting, no letter of resignation, no presidential thanks, no cordial parting. Instead, a blindsided Comey ends up in a live-streamed OJ Bronco ride, bolting from Los Angeles to be flown, defrocked, back to Washington. And why? Trump had become increasingly agitated with the Russia election investigation and Comey's very public part in it, or rather his ego had become agitated and agitated him. If Trump thought this would kill the inquiry and the story, or perhaps even just derail it somewhat, he's made the blunder of the decade, at least. Whacking Comey has brought more critical attention to the Russia story than anything imaginable. It won't stop the FBI investigation, and the confirmation hearings for a successor will become a nationally televised forum for collusion allegations, which up until now have remained a scandal in search of a crime. So why did he do it? Now we know. The king asked whether no one would rid him of this troublesome priest, and got so impatient he did it himself. Well, and also that Trump's an idiot. My fellow conservative Ronin J. Caruso did his daily public service at redstate.com by reminding us to forget anonymous sources because Trump's lies stand above all. This was from May 12th. The media, and by extension commentators and commentary websites, got burned over the preceding several days on anonymously sourced stories that turned out not to be true. One of them was the allegation that days before his firing, Comey requested additional resources for the Russian counterintelligence investigation. Acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe denied it during his Senate committee testimony. The other story involved the supposed threat by Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to resign when he told his recommendation letter was to be the cover for Donald Trump to fire Comey. People within the Justice Department and Rosenstein deny this. If anything, it is a clear warning to journalists and media organizations to be more cautious about running an anonymously sourced story, especially if the reporter has one source. You always get more than one source. Now, none of this changes the fact that Donald Trump lied about his rationale for firing James Comey. Trump supporters will say, "So what? He didn't need an excuse to fire Comey." Well, that's true. But then why give a reason at all, especially one that's a lie? Because Trump's an idiot, that's why. In Trump's interview with NBC's Lester Holt, Trump said he planned on firing Comey regardless of the Justice Department's recommendation. In doing so, Trump undermined and made a liar and a fool out of Vice President Pence, his own spokespeople, and senior aides who all referred to the Deputy Attorney General's recommendation letter for 2 full days. Trump referred to the recommendation in the termination letter he wrote to James Comey. So he made a liar of himself, too. Something else Trump said during his interview with Lester Holt is remarkable, though. Quote, "And in fact, when I decided to just do it," all right, let me get into character here. "And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story." Narcissists always refer to themselves in the third person, of course. "It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won." Boy, he just is so insecure about that, isn't he? Now, acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe directly contradicted that in his testimony, calling the Russia investigation highly significant. Remember, the Russiagate investigation was originally just a counterintelligence investigation. Nothing to do with Trump. Now, there's a criminal side to it, thanks to Trump's big mouth. Donald Trump is an idiot. Let's think back to the end of 2015. When Barack Obama in October of that year said, before the completion of the inquiry, that Hillary's private email server didn't compromise national security. Conservatives were rightly angered at what appeared to be Obama interfering, no matter how minor, with an ongoing investigation. What Trump did is no different. It is not a made-up story, and the semantics of whether or not it is Trump himself under investigation by the FBI or his campaign as part of the counterintelligence probe is absurd, especially when conservatives are the ones engaging in those semantics, or rather, cuck-servatives. Yes, the people screaming for impeachment and saying this is a constitutional crisis are morons. Trump didn't stop the investigation, and by statute, he had the authority to fire Comey. Problem is, Trump lied about why he fired Comey, and that is unacceptable. And another indication that Trump is an idiot. Remember how I pointed out yesterday that James Comey kept copious notes of all his meetings with Donald Trump? Well, this is the kind of thing that we can expect from those copious notes. Headline, per Susan Wright at Red State, "Trump may have asked James Comey to pledge loyalty to him days after his inauguration." I seem to recall we made reference to that already, but remember the proper role of the FBI director, of the Department of Justice as a whole. It's supposed to be impartial. It has to be objective, impartial, and independent and nonpartisan because of what their role is. They are the federal law enforcement apparatus. That cannot be partisan by definition. And the fact that Barack Obama partisanized it just ought to illustrate the point for Trump supporters. But they don't care about that independence, that objectivity. They just want it to work in their favor. Because that's what pushing Trump, that's what Trump mania was all along. It wasn't about cleaning up, it wasn't about draining the swamp, it wasn't about turning the country around. It was just about turning the same crap in their favor, doing it to the other side like they had done it unto them. Revenge, right? Now, there have been so many different stories, as varied as the reactions regarding the firing of FBI Director James Comey. The New York Times has grabbed a story that was whispered about, but never as bluntly put immediately after the shocking dismissal. Mainly, it may not have been as shocking to those closest to the event, such as James Comey himself. Comey may have suspected he was on thin ice days after Trump's inauguration when the new president called Comey for a private one-on-one dinner at the White House. Quote, according to sources who spoke with Comey, at that dinner, Trump asked for a pledge of loyalty from the FBI director. Remember, one that Comey was ethically prohibited from giving. And of course, Trump didn't get it. As they ate, the president and Comey made small talk about the election and the crowd sizes at Trump's rallies. Now, Trump was talking about that, and Comey was just, whatever. The president then turned the conversation to whether Comey would pledge his loyalty to him, which again he was ethically barred from doing. Comey declined to make that pledge. Instead, Comey has recounted to others, he told Trump that he would always be honest with him, but that he was not reliable in the conventional political sense because his role forbade that. I mean, that tells you all you need to know right there. Trump doesn't want an FBI that's independent and trustworthy and honorable and ethical. He wants an FBI that will do his bidding just like they did under Barack Obama. Donald Trump has the biggest case of Obama envy anybody has ever seen. And that's why he's angry all the time, because it doesn't work that way for Republicans, even fake ones. Trump was interviewed by NBC a week ago Thursday and gave a different account of the meeting, naturally, and there will be multiple versions coming from Trump alone. But in cases like this, you expect there to be a divide between the versions of the tale given by each side. Now, Trump has said the dinner meeting was so Comey could beg to keep his job. That's just the kind of petty, puerile spin that you would expect somebody like Donald Trump to put on it. But by Comey's account, his answer to Trump's initial question apparently did not satisfy the president. Of course it didn't. The associate said, later in the dinner, Trump again said to Comey that he needed his loyalty. In other words, kneel before Zod, all right? Comey again replied that he would give him honesty and did not pledge his loyalty, according to the account of the conversation. But Trump pressed him on whether it would be honest loyalty. You will have that, Comey told his associates, he responded. Close quote. See, the role of the FBI director isn't the same as cabinet members. It is supposed to be a nonpartisan law enforcement role. Otherwise, it's just secret police. Banana Republic stuff, like it was under Obama. So expecting loyalty really isn't how it's done and cannot be done. Comey described details of his refusal to pledge his loyalty to Trump to several people close to him on the condition that they not discuss it publicly while he was FBI director. And now that Comey has been fired, they felt free to discuss it on the condition of anonymity. And that's one risk Trump took with the firing. Comey is presumably no longer shackled by the job and can tell a lot of what went on behind the scenes. Parenthetically, pledging loyalty, that's what you do to a monarch, not a president. It reveals how Trump thinks. He thinks everybody is subordinate to him, just like Barack Obama did. He doesn't consider himself a public servant. He doesn't consider himself a servant to the people. He considers everybody as working for him, just like Barack Obama did. When Trump sent out Sarah Huckabee Sanders, deputy press secretary or deputy propaganda minister, to speak to the press about the firing, she described the meeting by saying Trump was seeking Comey's loyalty to the justice system. No, that's not. This is what I mean about, you want me to go out and say, what? Screw you guys, I'm going home. It was apparently Comey who had to let Trump know about the dossier collected on him by an ex-British intelligence officer, which revealed that Russia may have compromising information on him. You remember the BuzzFeed kerfuffle? It was after that that the dinner invitation came. Yes, the Russian investigation was about to rev up. Boy, Trump just creates piss-poor narratives for himself. Because of that, Comey was uneasy about the appearance of impropriety that might be created by a private dinner with Trump. He went, however, because he didn't feel he should immediately decline an invitation from the new president. During the meal, according to the account of the two associates, Comey tried to explain to Trump how he saw his role as FBI director. Comey told Trump that the country would be best served by an independent FBI and Justice Department. Yeah, that's kind of what the Constitution calls for, you see. Why does Trump have to be told this? Gets back to his unfitness for the job, frankly. The letter Trump sent to Comey said he was following the recommendations of Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Rod Rosenstein, Deputy Attorney General. The presumed reason was because of Comey's bizarre handling of the Hillary Clinton email server investigation. Or maybe not. Trump, who can't seem to get out of his own way, may have told the real reason in his NBC interview with Lester Holt. Trump said in the NBC interview, regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey. In fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, this Russia thing with Trump in Russia is a made-up story. Close quote. Now, to be clear, Comey was leading an investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016 election and possible collusion with Trump team members. Not Trump, but Trump team members. That's not arguable. Why did Trump bring in Paul Manafort, Carter Page, Michael Flynn? Because Trump's an idiot, that's why. Other reports have suggested Trump was miffed that Comey was spending more time on Russia than investigating leaks from the White House. Well, let's think of it this way. In what area could Comey get more done? There aren't enough fingers on God's green earth to plug all those leaks, frankly. That's what happens when you go out of your way to make as many enemies as possible. When you treat even allies like crap. Just ask Mike Pence. Having Trump publicly contradict his own spokesman, and in fact, his own words, about the reason for the firing is not a safe or wise move. No, literally, the man admitted on national TV that he fired the lead investigator because of the Russia investigation. Donald Trump is an idiot. I'd like to say this makes it harder for Trump's loyalists to defend him against suspicion, but I've dealt with them too often to believe theirs is a devotion that cannot be shaken by anything as flimsy as facts or reason. I am on record, ladies and gentlemen, as begging all sides to stop throwing around the I word, impeachment, regarding Donald Trump. Impeachment is not meant to be an election by other means. It's not a mulligan. It's not a do-over. Impeachment is a last resort. Impeachment is serious bleep. Because it's supposed to be difficult. The Founding Fathers made it that way. President can only be removed from office if he is impeached by the House of Representatives, which only requires a simple majority, and then a 2/3 supermajority of the United States Senate. It's only happened twice in American history. Neither time was the sitting president removed. It's difficult for a reason. So, all sides, please, for God's sakes, shut up about impeachment. At the very least, pace yourselves. Let the process play out. At the end of the Russiagate investigation, if there's anything on Trump in terms of original wrongdoing or cover-up or whatever else, then you move on to that. But it's not supposed to be easy. The case is, the case for it is supposed to be overwhelming. Now, all that having been said, Jay Caruso asked on May 12th at Red State, does Donald Trump want to get impeached? Why does he ask this question? Because Trump tweeted a veiled threat to James Comey. Apparently recently, Trump's White House staff made an attempt at an intervention to get Twitter out of his hands. Didn't work, obviously. You see, we would all be a lot better off if Trump resigned and let Mike Pence take over. Oh, God, yes. Pence is no prize either after his debasement and ongoing humiliation at Donald Trump's hands, but he'd be damn sight better than Trump. I mean, it's bad enough Trump fired James Comey because Trump didn't like there was a Russia investigation and because Comey wouldn't vow loyalty to him, kneel before Zod. Now he's making threats to Comey after he's walked out the door. Here is what the President of the United States tweeted on the morning of May 12th. James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press. I imagine the comparisons of Trump to Nixon piss off Trump too, but he brings it on himself. I mean, if you're a Republican president, even a fake one, do you really want to invoke Nixon and Watergate in your own context? For the uninitiated, that is the President of the United States saying to a former government official, you better be careful about what you tell reporters because I may have recorded our conversation and will leak them to the press. I thought leaks were bad. Is there anybody who was okay with this outside of hardcore Trumplicans who were with him from the start? Let's face it, they'd defend Trump if he fed a baby to a pack of starving hyenas. Seriously, I am asking, are all you cuck-conservatives who have said leaks are the most important story at all concerned about this? Yeah, that's a rhetorical question. Well, who couldn't have seen this coming? Headline, May 12th at Red State. My gal Susan Wright again. Trump administration battles new leaks in wake of Comey firing. Yeah, that's the thing about Trump and his supporters, his cultists, endlessly bitching and moaning about leaks. Leaks are the coin of the realm in Washington. Leaks are the ordinance of political combat in the nation's capital. They always have been, they always will be. These people act like leaks are something new that's only afflicted Trump. Good God, these people are parochial, solipsistic, just like their Cheeto hero. See, there is still an unresolved issue of leaks in the Trump White House. Now remember, this is the Trump White House. We're not talking about from the federal bureaucracy, the deep state. We're talking about his own White House. I mean, is there anybody in Washington, D.C. that Trump has not turned against him? Yeah, maybe. And you know what the answer to that question is? The only people who haven't turned against him are the biggest idiots of all, aside from, of course, Trump. His firing of James Comey, due to, as we now know by Trump's televised admission, the Russia investigation, has not inspired of loyalty or fear to quell those leaks, like it was ever going to. Rather, it may have set off a whole new stream of them. Gee, what a shock. In reality, the firing of Comey probably exacerbated long-simmering tensions between Trump and the intelligence community. Probably. He hasn't exactly been respectful of them, and even though he hasn't gone directly at them in weeks, it's kind of hard to forget that he spent a lot of time trying to turn the nation they're assigned to protect against them. Remember, one of the many things I always point out and I always remind you, Republican presidents, even fake ones, will never, ever win a political war or a leak war with the federal bureaucracy. The best they can do is put as many of their own people in administration posts and hope for the best. And of course, Trump has done very little of that because he's an idiot. These new events seem to have poked both the FBI and the Justice Department with a completely gratuitous and unnecessary sharp stick. Here's a quote from thehill.com. At a moment of crisis, the White House looks surrounded on the outside and divided on the inside. It's total chaos, said one former transition team official with close ties to the regime. It's image making on the inside and people trying to protect themselves. So it tends to happen on a sinking ship. There was a deep streak of paranoia among the staff. Oh, that reflects their boss, doesn't it? The communications team shit the bed on the Comey firing. Well, Trump shit the bed and he made his communications team lay in it. And now the war with the FBI has them all scared and throwing each other under the bus. Hey, what did I tell you, folks? Here's what the former transition team official with close ties to the Trump regime said. Quote, "Thank God I don't work there. If I did, I'd be dialing up my attorney. Close quote. And you wonder why I say that that is one job I would never take? Even now in my involuntary enforced retirement? Yeah, that don't sound good. Trump has had to deal with some sort of story of conflict or just bungling of basic issues and message pretty much every week since he took office. Having this become an issue now was not what he needed. In the stories, Trump's decision to fire Comey was described as the result of festering anger at the FBI director for failing to prioritize leaks coming out of the Bureau over the investigation into allegations Trump campaign officials colluded with the Russians during the election. Hey, maybe Trump should have just plugged his own damn leaks. That's not Comey's job, frankly. Trump was stewing at Comey for weeks, even as some close to him, including chief strategist Darth Bannon, reportedly advised. Now remember, this is Steve Bannon saying this. Chief strategist Darth Bannon reportedly advised Trump that now was not the time to fire James Comey. Even Bannon was telling Trump, don't do this, please. You don't need this. And Trump did it anyway, because Trump's an idiot. Further, it appears Trump only told his staff an hour, 1 hour, 60 minutes, 3,600 seconds ahead of time that he was about to fire Comey, but then took it out on them when they weren't prepared to adequately defend the move. And you wonder why there are leaks coming from within the Trump White House? That's why I say true loyalty is a two-way street. You can't demand that your staff be loyal to you if you're not going to be loyal to them. How would you like to work for an asshole like this? Trust me, I have. I know whereof I speak. And the flood of leaks and unflattering stories came tumbling out. This is why you don't put neophytes, amateurs, non-professionals in the White House. The presidency is not an entry-level job. Oh, boy. Everything from reports that Comey had asked for more funding for the Russia investigation just before being fired, something acting director McCabe tried to shoot down a week ago Thursday, to a report that Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, was so unhappy with being used as a pretext for the firing that he considered resigning. He denies it. The people on both sides of the controversy have their theories and are chiming in. Do we now have to worry about deep... Oh, here we go. I don't know if I can do Hannity. I'm too sane for that. Okay, I'll try to get through this. Do we now have to worry about deep state officials that gather intelligence are going to go after Americans and the president after Americans? Get over yourself, Sean. And the president politically or the FBI, some that don't like him, might be leaking to hurt this president? Sean Hannity, one of Trump's top bootlickers, asked on his Wednesday night show. You know, you might want to get Trump to stop hurting himself and making it so easy for his opponents. They're not bringing Trump down. Trump is committing political suicide. That's what's really going on. Yeah, no kid. Go after Americans? That was a bit of a leap. No kidding. Dov Zakheim, a former defense official in George W. Bush's administration, told The Hill those fears might not be far off. Should the administration be perceived as trying to influence, stall, or undermine the investigation, there will be justice lawyers and or FBI agents, or both, who will see it as their patriotic duty and ethical imperative to leak to the press, Zakheim said. There is so much karma in this whole fiasco that there's plenty to go around. Yeah, that part may be true. Trump has proven to be his own worst enemy in every regard. He wants loyalty like a monarch, but his actions don't really inspire loyalty or confidence. And some may very well set out to use their office to neutralize what they see as a corrosive element within Trump's administrative style. You know, it's like I say, investigate leaks, fine. I'm not opposed to that, but I really have zero sympathy for Trump because, again, he brought it all on himself. And in the words of Allah Pundit, here we go. Why make it easy for the deep state to rally against Trump? Why is Trump making it so easy for them to bring him down? Why? I mean, the last thing you would, if you are so concerned about the deep state, why are you doing everything you can to piss them off? Why are you doing everything in your power to motivate them to make that a self-fulfilling prophecy? Here's the headline. Red State, May 12th. Susan Wright. Past and present FBI officials rally around James Comey to dispute Trump account of private dinner. I have yet to see how this is an example of genius or 3D chess, or Trump has them right where he wants them. No, Trump has them right where they want him. Now, we earlier discussed the private dinner between newly inaugurated Donald Trump and FBI Director James Comey, and the reported request, demand, by Trump that Comey kneel before Trump. We also discussed how Trump spoke of that dinner in his NBC interview with Lester Holt, describing it quite differently. In other words, Trump was lying. Trump's telling is that Comey requested the dinner in order to beg for his job. Oh, boy. Those in a position to know, former and current FBI officials, are throwing flags on the field over that one. Remember that expression about don't throw rocks at a guy with a machine gun or copious notes? Here's what Trump said, just as a review. We had a very nice dinner at the White House very early on. I think he asked for the dinner, and he wanted to stay on as the FBI head, Trump said in the interview. And I said, consider, we'll see what happens. But we had a very nice dinner, and at the time he told me, you were not under investigation, which I knew anyway. Well, that's the part FBI officials are having a problem with. Pretty much all of that is wrong, they say. Comey tried to stay away from the Russian ties investigation, a former official close with Comey told NBC. he would say, "Look, sir, I really can't get into it, and you don't want me to," which I'm sure just piqued Trump's ire even more, as if to say, "What are you talking about?" Because does the FBI director serve at the president's pleasure? Yes. Should the president demand personal loyalty from the FBI director? No. Comey was abiding by his professional ethics that his position demanded of him. The current FBI official also confirmed to NBC that Comey did not request the one-on-one dinner. The president is not correct. In other words, the president's lying. The former official continued. The White House called him out of the blue. Comey didn't want to do it. He didn't even want the rank and file at the FBI to know about it. And gee, how would that look? The newly inaugurated president calls the FBI director who was overseeing investigations of Russia's connections to the 2016 election to a private dinner? How would that have looked to Trumpers if Hillary Clinton had been the president and did that? He's still the commander-in-chief. He's your boss. How do you say no? The official added. Indeed. If Caleb Howe said, "Let's hash out red state matters over a Big Mac," I'd feel obliged to go along with it. Caleb Howe being the editor-in-chief at Red State. How much more obliged do government officials feel when the president makes such a request? The former official also refuted claims a week ago Thursday by White House Deputy Propaganda Minister Sarah Huckabee Sanders that she had talked to countless members of the FBI who were grateful for the president's decision to fire Comey. I think that falls in the category of laying it on way too thick. I doubt 5 people at the FBI even have the phone number of the Deputy White House Press Secretary, the former senior official said. Close quote. To that point, when asked about Comey's status with FBI employees during the Senate hearings a week ago Thursday, Acting Director Andrew McCabe disputed claims by Trump's regime that Comey had lost the confidence of the Bureau by saying Comey did and still does enjoy the full support and respect of the FBI. The bottom line here is that Trump and his staff are lying about Comey and the circumstances surrounding his firing. They are making Trump enemies as fast as humanly possible. This will not play out well in the long run for Donald Trump, and he's too much of an idiot to realize it. You know, there's another thing that Trump's meltdown of the past 2 weeks has in common with Watergate, and that is the astonishment exhibited in and by the press. Almost like it's too good to be true. Here's a fake Republican, but nevertheless Republican president braiding his own noose, sticking his own head through it, and almost pulling the lever himself without them having to do anything. It's just being dropped into their laps like overripe fruit. Here's what Chris Wallace had to say. Now, Chris Wallace has spent the better part of the last 4 decades reporting in Washington for NBC, ABC, and now Fox News. And given his lengthy tenure of Beltway reporting, it is reasonable to assume that he did not come lightly to the following statement. Quote, "I just find it one of the most astonishing weeks that I've ever covered in this town." Close quote. Speaking with Shepard Smith a week ago Friday, the Fox News Sunday anchor offered his stunning take on the developments of the preceding week, from James Comey's firing as director of the FBI on Tuesday to Friday afternoon's White House press briefing, a briefing in which, when asked by Jeff Mason of Reuters, White House propagandist Sean Spicer did not deny the presence of recording devices in the Oval Office. It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable, ladies and gentlemen. Sean Spicer did not do, Trump sends out that tweet implying that there are recording devices in the Oval Office, and Sean Spicer didn't deny it. And then these people are pissed off that there's suspicion of cover-up or something? Nixon? Watergate? Hello? When I heard that exchange today between Jeff Mason, White House reporter, and Sean Spicer speaking from the podium in the briefing room for the President of the United States, it took my breath away, Wallace said. That was not, that was what in Watergate they called a non-denial denial. He was asked specifically, is there a recording device in the Oval Office of the President of the United States? And he said, I have nothing for you on that. He could have said no. He could have said yes. He said, I have nothing for you. You know what that tells me, parenthetically? He doesn't know. He doesn't know. And maybe Spicer, if that's a single brain cell in his head, he was probably thinking, oh, shit. How do I answer this? And what he said is, I got nothing for you on that. He doesn't know. He said, I have nothing for you on that. That is a non-denial denial. Look, it may just be that the president is trolling the press corps and saying, work yourself into a frenzy about this, and it turns out to be nothing. But why would he do that? Why would he want to decrease the credibility, which is already in question, of this White House and comments made from that podium? It seems to me that you're playing a very dangerous game with the currency of the credibility of the President of the United States. Close quote. Oh, jeez. Wallace went on to blast Donald Trump for the conflicting statements offered by him and his staff on the Comey firing. Every step, resuming the quote from Chris Wallace, every step he's taken this week has cut into the credibility of this White House, the trust of the people inside the White House, and clearly, I think, the trust that the American people pay to this president and to his White House staff. And Wallace added, I have never seen anything like it, and I find it very troubling. I just don't understand the game that they're playing. Because it isn't a game. Eric Erickson at The Resurgent was short and to the point. Shut the hell up, Mr. President. Rod Rosenstein wrote an excellent and articulate memorandum explaining the need to fire his direct report, James Comey. Comey had, on several occasions, overstepped his bounds. Most recently, Comey testified under oath to Congress. Much of what he said is not true. The FBI, embarrassingly, had to retract his testimony. The Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General recommended Comey be fired. They cited Comey's several missteps, the bipartisan complaints about him, and the recent testimony. Donald Trump fired him. Vice President Pence and the entire White House apparatus swung into defense to defend the decision. as is the purpose of the White House communications apparatus. One message, one party line. That's what they're supposed to do. The decision was made with consideration and consultation and was not made lightly. The press ran with a report that Rod Rosenstein was angry at being made the man responsible. The press said Rosenstein was going to quit as a result. Turns out that was not true. The press ran with a report that James Comey had asked for additional funds for the FBI's investigation into Russia shortly before his firing. Now that, perhaps, was not true either. The press ran with the report that Rod Rosenstein asked for and was granted an emergency meeting with the chair and vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Turns out the meeting was scheduled prior to Comey's firing. Everything made sense and was justified despite the partisan outrage. It was defensible, even if the timing looked putrid. But God help us all, Trump felt overshadowed. He was subservient to checks, balances, systems, and recommendations. So what did Trump do? He lashed out and said he'd made up his mind to fire Comey even before the Department of Justice recommendation. On top of that, he said he would have fired Comey regardless of Justice's recommendation. In one short interview, Donald Trump made liars of every single person who mounted a credible defense of the decision, a decision that remains defensible. But the decision is not defensible if Trump did it just because Comey wasn't loyal to him personally. The decision was not defensible if Trump did it because he felt personally offended by the FBI director. Donald Trump's behavior is, well, gee, this just in, juvenile and asinine. He undermines his vice president, his communications team, and the very foundational reasons for firing Comey. He can't help but make it about himself, and in so doing, he undermines his own integrity in, well, he didn't have any integrity to undermine in the first place. Donald Trump needs to shut the hell up. He does himself and those around him absolutely no favors. He has done them more harm than good, to say nothing of himself. And the kicker is, I think he's lying to boot. Donald Trump has an overwhelming need to make it all about himself. And if he fired Comey based on someone else's advice, it would not be about him and his brilliant skills. And to quote Mr. Erickson here, so this is not me saying it in this case, it's Eric Erickson saying it, Donald Trump is an idiot. You may be familiar with the name Charlie Sykes. He was, and I'm assuming still is, a never Trump conservative talk radio host in Wisconsin. He was a big factor in Ted Cruz winning the Wisconsin Republican primary last year over Donald Trump. And he had a piece in the New York Times, May 12th, that just fricassees the Trumplican and conservative media. Trump's version of the mainstream media, because that's what Trump wants. He doesn't want media objectivity. He wants the media to be as much up his ass as it was under or up Barack Obama's. Now, if there was one principle that used to unite conservatives, it was respect for the rule of law. Not long ago, conservatives would have been horrified at wholesale violations of the norms and traditions of our political system, and would have been appalled by a president who showed overt contempt for the separation of powers. But, week before last, as if on cue, most of the conservative media fell into line, celebrating Donald Trump's abrupt dismissal of the FBI Director James Comey and dismissing the fact that Comey was leading an investigation into the Trump campaign and its ties to Russia. Dems in meltdown over Comey firing, declared a headline on Trump News, as Tucker Carlson gleefully replayed clips of Democrats denouncing the move. It's just insane, actually, he said, referring to the reactions. Well, he wasn't wrong about that. On Fox and talk radio, the message was the same, with only a few conservatives willing to sound a discordant or even cautious note. The talk show host Rush Limbaugh, someone for whom I have totally lost all respect, was positively giddy, opening his monologue on Wednesday by praising Trump for what he called his epic trolling of liberals. Yeah, Limbaugh's not a conservative. He's a reactionary. This proves it redundantly. This is great, Limbaugh declared. Can we agree that Donald Trump is probably enjoying this more than anybody wants to admit or that anybody knows? Well, I think there's quite a bit of disagreement with that. So he fires Comey yesterday. Who's he meet with today? He's meeting with the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov. I mean, what an epic troll this is. Oh, there's more to come on that in a future video/podcast simulcast. Now, given the enthusiasm for Trump's apologists, it is likely that much of Trump's base will similarly rally to him as it has in the past, because they're all idiots too. Lemmings is a better description now that I think about it. But most important, we saw once again how conservatism, with its belief in ordered liberty, is being eclipsed by something different. Loathing those who loathe Trump. Rabid anti-Trumpism. In a lamentably overlooked monologue this month, Limbaugh embraced the new reality in which conservative ideas and principles had been displaced by anti-liberalism. In other words, conservatism is now reactionaryism. For years, Limbaugh ran what he called the Institute for Advanced Conservative Studies. But in the Trump era, he told his audience he has changed that to the Institute for Advanced Anti-Leftist Studies, which is not the same thing. That is how Limbaugh has become liberal himself. Because if you no longer stand for anything, if you're just you're reactionary. That's not conservatism, ladies and gentlemen. With Trump in the White House, conservative principles were no longer the point, Limbaugh exulted. How many times during the campaign did I warn everybody Trump is not a conservative? Multiple times a day, Limbaugh said. So why did you support him? How many times have I told you, do not expect Trump to be a conservative? He isn't one. Then why did you support him? He went on to emphasize that the campaign was not about conservatism because that's not what Trump is about. So why did you support him? That was a brazen admission. But it is also a key to understanding what is happening on the right. The alt-right. While there are those like Sean Hannity who are reliable cheerleaders for all things Trump, much of the conservative news media is now less pro-Trump than it is anti-Trump. The distinction is important because anti-Trumpism has become the new safe space for the right. Here's how it works. Rather than defend Trump's specific actions, his conservative champions change the subject to 1. The biased fake news media, 2 over-the-top liberals, 3 hypocrites on the left, 4 anyone else victimizing Trump or his supporters, and 5 whataboutism, as in what about Obama? What about Clinton? Well, guess what? Neither of them are in power. Trump is. Move on. For the anti-Trump pundit, whatever the allegation against Trump, whatever his blunders, foibles, the other side is always worse. Talk about lowering the bar. But the real heart of anti-Trumpism is the delight and the frustration and anger of his opponents. Trump's base is unlikely to hold him either to his promises or tangible achievements because conservative politics is now less about ideas or accomplishments than it is about making the right enemies cry out in anguish. In other words, it is tribalism. Trump's vocal supporters don't have to defend his specific actions as long as they make liberal heads explode. Or as Sarah Palin put it so memorably, it's really funny to me to see the splody heads keep exploding. I'm not even going to bother with she can see Russia from her house, which, if you will recall, she never actually said. And anyway, but you can just see her saying it, can't you? It's really, now, if liberals hate something, the argument goes that it must be wonderful and worthy of aggressive defense. That is what is known as turning off your brain. Each controversy reinforces the division, the distrust, the tribalism, and Trump counts on that. He needs his suckers to remain on the hook. For many in the conservative movement, this sort of anti-Trumpism is the solution to the painful conundrum posed by the Trumpency itself. In other words, they got buyer's remorse, but they don't want to admit it. Or at least they haven't brought themselves to the point of admitting never Trump's right. But the vast majority of conservative voters and listeners well, they're not conservative if they're behind Trump. Let's start that again. With a vast majority of conservative voters and listeners solidly behind Trump, conservative critics of Trump find themselves isolated and under siege. But as Damon Linker noted, anti-Trumpism allows the right to indulge its hatred of liberals and liberalism while sidestepping the need for a reckoning with the disaster of the Trump regime itself. This, too, I have seen firsthand, ladies and gentlemen. This is also a much sounder business model than airing doubts about Trump. Conservative media is, of course, a business that relies on ratings. By the way, Fox News is now in third place behind CNN and MSNBC, just saying. And few things generate ratings more quickly than bashing liberals. In this case, more profitable for talk show hosts to play down Trump's failures while piling on his enemies. That is not a sustainable business model. That is short-term thinking, not looking at the longer term, the damage that is being done to conservatism by Trump mania. Now, the ad hominem argument is rightly regarded as a logical fallacy because it substitutes personal attacks for a discussion of the argument someone is making. Oh, I see this on a daily basis, my friends. But on many talk shows, including Limbaugh's, nearly every argument is ad hominem. Instead of offering statistics and building a case, which you do when you're for something, it is easier to simply make fun of a Trump critic like Maxine Waters or shrug off a negative report because it came from the lamestream media. Not surprisingly, the vast majority of airtime on conservative media is not taken up by issues or explanations of conservative approaches to markets or need to balance liberty with order. Why bother with such heavy lifting when there are personalities personalities to be mocked and left-wing moonbats to be ridiculed. Lazy. What may have begun as a policy or a tactic in opposition has long since become a reflex. But there is an obvious price to be paid for essentially becoming a reactionary party, one devoted to trolling. In the long run, it's hard to see how a party dedicated to liberal tears can remain a movement based on ideas or centered on principles. There's that nagging little reality check again. Conservatives will care less about governing and more about scoring wins and inflicting losses on the left, no matter how hollow the victories or flawed the policies. Ultimately, though, this will end badly because it is a moral and intellectual dead end, and very likely a political one as well. The right's reaction to the firing of James Comey hardly bodes well. Even conservatives who are still smarting from his handling of Hillary Clinton's emails should recognize that the timing of Comey's abrupt dismissal in the midst of a growing investigation into Russian meddling raises fundamental questions about the rule of law and the possibility that justice is being obstructed. As the right doubles down, or the alt-right, doubles down on anti-Trumpism, it will find itself goaded into defending and rationalizing ever more outrageous conduct just as long as it annoys CNN and the left. In many ways, anti-Trumpism mirrors Donald Trump himself. Well, fancy that. Because at its core, there are no fixed values, no respect for constitutional government, or ideas of personal character, only a free-floating nihilism cloaked in insult, mockery, and bombast. Needless to say, this is not a form of conservatism that Edmund Burke or even Barry Goldwater would have recognized. We in Never Trump warned you. We warned all of you. We warned you the path that you were going down by backing Donald Trump. And once again, you are now reaping the whirlwind of it. And sooner or later, you're going to have to admit that we were right and you were wrong. Jim Garrity headlined it this way: another amazing act of self-sabotage. A week ago Friday, Donald Trump tweeted, as we alluded to earlier in this program, James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press. Well, that same day, both Sean Spicer and Donald Trump himself refused to confirm or deny if the president had any secret recordings of those conversations. The non-denial denial that Chris Wallace was talking about. Spicer said, "I've talked to the president and he doesn't have anything to add to that." In an interview with Jeanine Pirro, Trump said, "I can't talk about that. I won't talk about that." You know, if Trump does have a secret taping system in the Oval Office, and if he didn't, either Trump or Spicer could have answered with a simple, "There is no recording system." This is an absurd self-sabotage of Trump's own interests. The entire concept of a president's executive privilege rests on the idea that the president needs the best, most honest, most unvarnished advice and information possible, even if that advice would be controversial or unpopular. The thinking is that if an advisor, member of Congress, foreign leader, or other official knew that their communications with the president could be made public someday, they would self-censor themselves. and give less than the full truth. As NPR notes, yes, National Public Radio, in its ruling on the Nixon tapes, the Supreme Court noted, quote, the valid need for protection of communications between high government officials and those who advise and assist them in the performance of their manifold duties. End of quote. Well, starting May 12th, anybody who talks to Trump has to wonder if that conversation is being recorded, and whether Trump might someday leak that recording if he gets sufficiently pissed at that person. Best to not say anything to the president that you're not comfortable seeing attached to your name in print. Again, he's going out of his way to make enemies of everybody around him. And the truly disquieting part is that I don't think he would have it any other way. But that is not the way to run the presidency. It guarantees disaster. Jonathan Tobin echoes Eric Erickson at National Review, same day, May the 12th. Stop talking, President Trump. Trump is his own worst enemy. There's a recurring theme. And he may well destroy his presidency if he doesn't change, that of which he is singularly incapable. You see where this is eventually headed. The virtual antipathy, the virulent antipathy Donald Trump inspires among his political foes and critics may well exceed that of any president in the history of our republic. But if there is anything to be learned from what has happened in the days since he fired FBI Director James Comey, it is that there is no doubt that the name of the president's worst enemy is Donald J. Trump. Trump's inability to stay on message was a serious problem throughout the 2016 campaign and has at times derailed his regime during his first 100 days in office, 100 plus. His early morning Twitter meltdowns, such as his ill-advised attack on a Gold Star family or his wild claim that Barack Obama had ordered the bugging of Trump Tower, set off media firestorms that dominated the news cycle and distracted the public from anything positive he might otherwise have been doing. Yet nothing he has done has been so counterproductive as the things he has said and tweeted since dispatching James Comey earlier week before last. In an act of almost unprecedented stupidity, Trump has single-handedly elevated what might have been a momentary tempest into a full-blown hypercane of national outrage that has stopped the country in its tracks. Democrat hypocrisy and media bias were the reasons the firing of a figure who has inspired bipartisan criticism was initially treated as Trump's worst outrage yet. Comey's antics with respect to the Hillary Clinton email scandal during the presidential campaign were unprecedented. He saved Mrs. Clinton's candidacy and then did her material harm before issuing a final "never mind" statement before Election Day. Though he should have resigned during the presidential transition period, calls for his ouster from both parties continued, with Hillary Clinton's comments the previous week directly blaming him for electing Trump being just one in a long list. The announcement of the decision was mishandled and reflected what we have come to take for granted as the routine chaos of the Trump White House. No clear explanation was initially offered for the timing of the firing, and then the stories started to change. But whether the impetus for the decision was a memo by newly sworn-in Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, or whether his conclusion was just the trigger for Trump doing what he had always planned to do, the firing was still eminently defensible and something the president had every right to do. Howls of outrage from Democrats that the only reason Trump acted was to stop an investigation into charges of collusion between his campaign and the Russians didn't stand up to scrutiny. Simply changing the man at the head of the FBI wouldn't halt a probe that had been in the works since last summer. In fact, liberals had gone quiet in the last 2 months about the supposed Russian connection after a sensible shift in Trump's foreign policy to criticism of Moscow's actions in Syria and support for NATO had undermined the theory that he was a puppet of Moscow. Nor had any proof of any kind of collusion emerged since the story based on the initial leaks about the investigation back in January. The fact that even that account, published in the New York Times, conceded that there was no proof of collusion was telling, and nothing discovered since then has given substance to the allegations. Had the regime simply ignored the critics, the story about the Comey firing would have died down. But in typical Trumpist fashion, the president decided to fix the public relations fiasco over the issue himself, thus making it incalculably worse. And that's when the real trouble started. In an interview with NBC's Lester Holt, Trump changed his story about Comey, and while sniping at the FBI director, said he'd had the Russia investigation in mind when he decided to fire him. That compounded the mistake in his initial statement about the firing, which alleged that Comey had told him he was not the target of an investigation. If that wasn't bad enough, Trump later let loose on, ta-da, Twitter. He warned Comey against leaking any damaging material about him after an unsubstantiated story leaked by the FBI director's camp claimed that the president had demanded and failed to receive a pledge of loyalty from Comey. Trump's words poured Watergatean, if that's a term, and it is because I just said it, gasoline on an already inflamed chorus of political and media critics. Instead of hypocritical rumblings about Trump's alleged motives for the firing, the left now had something real on which to pin their hyperbolic charges. Suddenly, the story went from an inside-the-beltway obsession with the bad optics of Comey's exit to charges that Trump was obstructing justice. The Watergate analogies were ratcheted up to charges that Trump was channeling Richard Nixon's desperate last months in office. For liberals and Democrats, Trump's statements connected the dots between Comey and what they are sure are crimes the president has committed. It was one thing to assert, as the left has done all year, that Trump must be hiding something about collusion with the Putin regime. But the president's threats and shifting stories seem to add substance to a circumstantial case of both obstruction and even treason being built by his critics. Boy, it just makes you wonder whether Trump is just trying to find any way out of the presidency while still somehow saving some measure of face, doesn't it? I mean, if you want to take the rational view, that's the most rational explanation that I can come up with. That Trump wants out, that Trump really never... I mean, I said this back in the campaign. Trump wanted to prove he could win the election. He didn't actually want to be president. And he's since confirmed that. Remember? About a month ago? Whoa, this job was harder than I thought it would be. He doesn't want to be president. He wanted to prove he could win the election. Now he's looking for any way out he can find while still saving face. I think the best way that Trump could find is getting himself impeached. I mean, think about it. If Trump resigns, is there any way for him to save face and do that? Because think about it. If he resigns, then the Democrats are going to say, well, just like Nixon, he was resigning in advance of being impeached. But if he can get himself impeached, then he makes of himself or casts himself as the martyr, and he can claim that, well, my enemy's got me, I'm gonna, counter punching. I mean, Trump is not happy if he's not making enemies as fast as he possibly can. Getting himself impeached, that would fit right into his counter-punching siege mentality, for lack of a better way of describing it. Hey, don't doubt me on this. I'm not saying he's going to be impeached, but I'm saying that he's looking for a way out, and I'm thinking, and this is the only rational explanation I can think of for Trump's seemingly insane actions, that he was looking for a way out. And that would suit his personality and his purposes quite nicely. Even as Trump continues to keep digging deeper the hole in which he has placed himself, it's important to remember one large and rather important problem with the Nixon-Watergate analogies, as well as with the accusations of impeachable offenses. There is, as of yet, not a shred of proof to substantiate any of it. I mean, this is the core of how Trump is his own worst enemy. He is creating every appearance of a massive cover-up of what may well be nothing. The New York Times inadvertently provided a clear argument against the Watergate treason line of reasoning in the editorial it published titled The Trump-Russia Nexus. Its goal was to provide a list of all the evidence for the charge that Trump is covering up some sort of collusion with the Russians. But the problem with the argument is that there was nothing in the editorial that substantiated their accusations. It spoke of Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Jeff Sessions, Michael Flynn, and alleged Trump business connections with Russia, but there was hardly any smoke on the list, let alone fire. It was just a compendium of innuendos that told, well, it's more than just innuendos. I mean, certainly Manafort and Carter Page and Michael Flynn have Russian connections, and Trump hired them. He brought them into his campaign, but then Trump's an idiot. It was just a compendium of innuendos that told us nothing about collusion. By comparison, the admittedly circumstantial proof of corruption by Bill and Hillary Clinton offered by Peter Schweitzer in his book Clinton Cash is an open and shut case. Indeed, Schweitzer's account of the Clinton State Department's okay of a Clinton Foundation donors selling a uranium mine to Russia was far worse than anything the Times could offer about the Trump camp. The point here is that you don't have to be a supporter of Trump or of his conduct toward Comey to understand that there is still not a shred of proof to back up the talk of Trump's guilt with regard to Russia. Do Trump's utterances and actions have any explanation other than guilt about Russia? Well, yeah, his ego. That's your explanation. Not if you were determined to work backwards from an assumption about his culpability to seize upon anything that might back up the charge. Cardassian justice, in other words. But if there is anything that we should have learned about Donald Trump in the last 2 years, that he has been a national political figure. It is that what generally passes from his lips is not the truth or based on anything that is even related to it. Even his most bitter foes know by now that what he says or tweets is usually dictated by a desire to denigrate foes and, more important, elevate his own importance. His ego, his monumental insecurities. Basing any argument, let alone a criminal case, that would justify impeachment on a Trump tweet is as silly as blind faith in his honesty. None of this is an argument for his fitness for the presidency, obviously. To the contrary, this episode is a reminder of why so many principled conservatives opposed his candidacy. Holding up my hand. But neither is it a justification for a rush to impeachment based on nothing more than Trumpian hot air and braggadocio. Again, impeachment is supposed to be hard, and it's supposed to be as a last result. Because remember, impeachment is a political act. It's not a criminal justice act. It is a political act. Impeachment is not supposed to be election by other means. Democrats who are thrilled by Trump's missteps need to remember that if they put all their eggs in the treason basket, they are more likely than not to wind up with egg on their faces again. If investigations, whether carried out by the FBI, Congress, or whatever special commission or prosecutor might be or is brought into life by the current Führer, and his name is Robert Mueller, fail to prove a case against Trump. But Republicans are also at risk of being sunk by a president whose big mouth is primarily responsible for inflating a minor story into a major scandal that won't go away. Imploring Trump to act in a judicious manner is the equivalent of asking him to flap his arms and fly to the moon. But those who understand that the interests of the nation or of conservatism will not be advanced by a bogus push to brand Trump a traitor do need to tell him that he must learn to shut up. If he doesn't, he will ultimately destroy his presidency and the party he leads. See? Never Trump told you so. Reality TV governance. That's what Michael Brendan Dougherty. That's how Michael Brendan Dougherty put it, aptly. NationalReview.com. This is Trump's show, and everyone else is just living in it. When Donald Trump fired FBI Director James Comey, David Frum described it as a coup, which is silly. Writing at Vox, Philip Carter declared the firing another win for Vladimir Putin. I don't know about that. Although I'm sure that Lavrov and Trump had a big guffaw about it a couple days later. Lawrence Tribe decided to use the T word, treason. Yeah. Maybe you believe Donald Trump capable of involving himself in a foreign-led conspiracy that had concluded with him becoming president of the United States, only to screw it up by acting in the most guilty way imaginable. But to my eyes, this looks like more like a case of the E word. Donald Trump was having another episode. He saw something he didn't like in the media, got angry, and thought he could end it by sending out a pink slip. And after all, you're fired. It ended scores of other storylines, hadn't it? That might sound like a defense, but it's not. The regime lied. Rod Rosenstein dutifully produced the official reason the director could mishandle the investigation Commissar of State Hillary Clinton's email scandal. But dozens of White House sources and a half-dozen Trump interviews this week confirmed that Comey was fired simply because he annoyed Trump. The giveaway is another word that has featured prominently in coverage of the firing and the potential candidates to assume control of the FBI. Loyalty. Kneel before Trump. Trump has this idea that the executive branch is an extension of the Trump campaign, the Trump brand, and even the Trump family. Cue the Godfather parallels here, I guess. If the FBI director is someone whom Donald Trump technically employed, and Donald Trump can fire him, then it follows he ought to be on Team Trump. Instead of being loyal to the country or the law, which Trump is also supposed to be, Trump imagines that everyone on the federal payroll ought to bend the knee. James Comey made the mistake of continuing to appear in headliner stories that angered Trump, so he had to go. Now, I admit that my theory doesn't offer the psychological kick that the others do. The problem isn't that Donald Trump is an illegitimate president, empowered by a foreign potentate. It's that our legitimate president is Donald Trump, star of the Donald Trump Show, which has taken quite a dramatic turn as it enters its final run. He wants all the other stars to be committed to the plot line. Donald Trump is our hero, and he wants good ratings, which means he has to keep the drama going. In a strange way, the Comey incident confirms that, for Donald Trump, almost nothing can be merely political. It's all personal. Not the way to run a presidency. Someone with even the most rudimentary political instincts would have counseled Trump against canning Comey while the FBI's investigation of his campaign and associates was still ongoing. If just for appearance's sake. Again, even Steve Bannon was telling him this. And indeed, those with political instincts did. Speak of the devil. Darth Bannon, the supposedly vengeful Machiavelli behind the Trump throne, is said to have cautioned the boss that this was an unwise move. But as predicted, Trump makes everything about his personal relationships and how they play on TV. When foreign leaders pay him a visit, he does not offer the usual canned, anodyne public statements about their meetings, with their talk of mutual interests and cooperation. Instead, he casts himself and foreign leaders in an ongoing series of buddy cop movies and romances. President Z, we have a really great relationship, Trump said to the AP. Great relationship with Merkel, one of the best, he told Time. She loves Ivanka. There are dramatic reconciliations, too. Weeks after blowing up at Australia's Prime Minister, Trump met him and smiled to kick off the next act. It got a bit testy, but that's okay, he said. Luckily for our nation's place in the world, Trump treats other leaders like movie star peers. He has great chemistry with Z. Employees, meanwhile, are afforded no such deference. In fact, James Comey is almost no different to Trump than a media antagonist such as Joe Scarborough or Rosie O'Fatass. The FBI was just part of a mediascape polluted with stories that don't flatter Trump. It was time, as Trump likes to say, to fire Comey like a dog. And that's a quote. And then tweet about it. Get the casting agents to Pennsylvania Avenue, pronto. Will this scandal hurt the Trumpetency? Almost certainly. But only by doing further damage to the public's already low opinion of the White House's competence. Who wants to work in an administration that will turn on you like this if circumstances should temporarily put you at odds, public odds, with the boss? Will it hurt Trump politically in the long run? Yeah, there's a good chance. But if gross-out digressions about blood, whether a pig's or Megyn Kelly's, didn't turn off enough Americans to sink him, maybe the impolitic dumping of a lawman won't either. For all I know, this style of governance will work to Trump's advantage. Cable news ratings are up, except Fox News, of course. Newspaper subscriptions, too. It may be a trolling disaster, but I can't stop watching. Well, actually, I never started. Former WCW head Eric Bischoff wrote a book once. It was entitled Controversy Creates Cash. Yeah, all this Trump drama is driving up, well, all cable TV ratings except Fox News, which is way down. But doesn't that suggest that what is driving the cable ratings is that there are more and more and more people who can't stand Donald Trump? Who better and more appropriate to bring this trilogy to a close than Jonah Goldberg and his G file for the Comey firing week? Rather than rationalizing and enabling Trump's behavior, conservatives need to convince Trump that he's his own worst enemy. Again, this really is constructive criticism, because the only one Trump is hurting by his antics is himself. Good times, huh? Let's start with Ann Coulter's tweet that we discussed yesterday. Comey firing is a red herring to distract from the fact that Trump hasn't started building the wall. Now, I don't actually think this is true, but I've been told for months, Mr. Goldberg writes, that I have to get better at taking something seriously without taking them literally. It's a Biden-esque phrase, isn't it? And Goldberg thinks Ann has a point. So I'm going to ask my pro-Trump and passionately anti-Trump friends to just take a step back and ask yourselves, what does Donald Trump's manufactured, self-inflicted, and pathological need for drama get you? What's it getting you? If you're about to answer Neil Gorsuch, the everlasting gobstopper of Trump rationalizations, please, just don't. If you're about to answer judges, don't go there either. Because the correct answer in policy terms is zero, nothing. Actually, less than nothing, because all this drama makes getting things done harder. Remember how that was one of Trump's selling points? He knows how to get things done? Evidently not. In the best possible light, all the insanity from the President of the United States is St. Elmo's Fire, a light show to entertain us. It's a Mexican soap opera without the redeeming sex and cleavage. It's a reality TV show without the catfights, stiletto heels, and thrown glasses of wine. Ask anybody, off the record of course, on Capitol Hill about whether all this drama helps them get bills passed or judges confirmed. They will laugh at the question. This is irrespective of any specific policy agenda. If you want a wall that can be seen from space along the southern border, if you want a Muslim ban, if you want to get rid of Obamacare, if you want to waste $1 trillion on infrastructure, or any other core goal of the original MAGA agenda, none of this helps. None of it. Trump was never destined for Mount Rushmore, but every insane tweet is a step further away from it. I can only imagine poor Reince Priebus freaking out like Jerry Maguire, shouting at Cuba Gooding Jr. in the locker room, "Help me! Help you! Help me! Help you!" While an air-drying naked Donald Trump giggles at the spectacle. A lot has been written about how people can't let go of the campaign mindset. But the best example of this is how I hear every day that whatever Trump may be doing wrong, it's still better than Hillary. Of course, that's got a lot of truth to it when it comes to things such as judicial appointments and the fact that we don't have to put up with the Clintons' "there's no eating in the library" officiousness. But now that Trump is president, it's utterly irrelevant, save to those who need to reassure themselves daily. who can't move on, who can't deal with the reality of the trumpetancy. But there's another form, of the campaign mentality that is keeping people from thinking clearly now. Say what you will about Trump's thyroidal tweeting and aphasic outbursts. It worked for him. It's going to work for anybody else. Trump's approach was so unfathomably strange, so otherworldly in the realm of Earth logic, that his biggest fans had to believe it was all part of some grand strategy. Note, had to believe. It was the ultimate expression of blind faith. I'm still seeing it today. This is a natural human response from our baser natures. When something or someone is so incomprehensibly strange and yet successful, we often just assume and remember that Benny Hill line about never assume anything because it makes an ass out of you and me. We often assume there's a genius at work that is just beyond our ability to grasp. Bernie Madoff built billions, from people who just couldn't bring themselves to argue the success. I've always thought that some modern artists are also con artists. They create something so strange, so aesthetically alien, that insecure rich people assume it must be a work of a genius. So they're willing to spend vast sums to convince other people that A, they can afford to indulge in it, and B, they're members of the cognoscenti too. The greatest example of this is probably Piero Manzoni's Merda d'Artista. I don't really speak Italian. That's my best crack at it. In 1961, Manzoni literally crapped in a can. 90 tins of it, to be exact. He printed out labels for the cans that read, and I'm quoting here, "Artist's shit. Contents 30 grams net. Freshly preserved, produced and tinned in May 1961. In a touch that no novelist would dare attempt, Manzoni's father, who actually owned a cannery, told his son, quote, "Your work is shit." It was a pas de deux of taking something both literally and seriously. Of course, last August, Manzoni's canned feces sold at auction for 275,000 euros. You realize how old that crap is, right? Now, much has also been written about how Donald Trump became a billionaire by being, if not an outright con artist, then certainly a kind of performance artist. He sold an image, a lifestyle, a brand. "I played to people's fantasies," Trump wrote, quote in quotes, in The Art of the Deal. "I call it truthful hyperbole." Honest deception. "It's an innocent form of exaggeration and a very effective form of promotion." In other words, he can't be honest about himself. He has to lie. And boy, this last 2 years and the next 4 are the capstone of that particular career, aren't they? Again, it worked for him. I don't think Trump is as rich as he claims, but so what? He's rich enough, and he's famous, and now he's president. But what so many people can't or won't contemplate is that what worked for Trump in business, self-promotion, and even the presidential election does not transfer to the presidency itself. This is a staggeringly obvious insight that many people are contorting themselves not to see. Sometimes skills don't transfer. Piero Manzoni was arguably the most successful canner of feces in human history. I am happy to acknowledge that. But if I were wheeled on a gurney into an operating room, I would not take much solace from the fact that he were my heart surgeon. Don't worry, Mr. Goldberg. I made a fortune spackling shit into a can. You'll be fine. Nurse, hand me that sharp thing. Michael Jordan was a kind of artistic genius at basketball. Do I really have to belabor the point that those skills don't necessarily translate into being a successful president? Bear that in mind when you hear rumors about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson running in 2020. I am shocked daily by the number of people who cannot let go of the idea, the article of blind faith, really, that Donald Trump has his opponents right where he wants them. The logical upshot of this is that he somehow meant to have historically craptacular poll numbers. Currently, the average, in the Real Clear Politics average, 39%. 15 points underwater, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, if he can execute his will and play 10 moves ahead of the rest of us, then this is part of his plan? On Thursday, or a week ago Thursday, Goldberg noted in the corner at nationalreview.com that Donald Trump tried to convince the editors of The Economist magazine, that he, and he alone, coined the phrase "prime the pump" to describe Keynesian economic stimulus. This is just bizarre. It's even more bizarre when you consider that Trump claims he invented the phrase just a few days ago, especially since he's been using the term himself for more than a year. I asked readers what could possibly explain this objectively ridiculous statement, and sure as shinola, a common answer was, it's all part of his plan! By saying something absurd, Trump is getting people to talk about how he's going to prime the pump. Get it? Genius! Or, Donald Trump is an idiot. This is a very small example of a very large problem. The rush to defend the myth of Trump is causing conservatives to abandon their principles, abandon their standards, and abandon their credibility at a breathtaking pace. Forget the issue of who coined the phrase "prime the pump." Everybody seems to have overlooked the fact that we have a Republican president defending a school of economics that conservatives have been trying to beat back for more than a century. And free market economists were anti-Keynesian before Keynes was born. Now, I know Trump was talking about tax cuts here, and there's a Keynesian argument for tax cuts that conservatives sometimes flirt with. But Trump also uses "prime the pump" for his infrastructure boondoggle. More to the point, he just doesn't know what he's talking about. And yet that doesn't stop him from calling in Elmo's fire to keep people from noticing. But forget about conservative dogma and doctrine for the time being. Trump made clear long ago that he doesn't give a Manzoni about that stuff, and he won. So just look at basic politics. I have no problem with the argument that James Comey deserved to be fired. I'm more sympathetic to him than some of my colleagues, Goldberg writes, but that's irrelevant. In principle, a president can fire an FBI director for any reason he wants, or for no reason at all. And there were certainly defensible reasons for Comey to go. But come on, people. The way Comey was fired was simply malpractice on a scale on par with Barack Obama's decision to contract out the Obamacare website to the Amish community's finest programmers. There was no reason to rush it. There was no reason to humiliate Comey while he was in Los Angeles visiting an FBI field office and make an enemy out of him in the process, one who took copious notes. There was no reason, as in rationality, to any of it. No reasonable person could believe that the same guy who invited chants of "Lock her up!" and defended Comey's guts for reopening the Hillary Clinton investigation in October wanted to fire Comey for his unfairness to Hillary Clinton. And yet, Trump humiliated his vice president and the White House communications team by letting them go out and peddle precisely that nonsense. Trump now defends the gelding of his vice president on the grounds that he's just too busy to keep his most loyal surrogates from beclowning themselves. Quote, this is a Trump quote, "As a very active president with lots of things happening, it is not possible for my surrogates to stand at a podium with perfect accuracy." Close quote. Then why would they want to go before a podium at all on his behalf? Now, no one's looking for perfect accuracy, but if the White House had waited even 24 hours, they could have avoided objective lies. The response from the drivers of the permanent wagon circle, however, is to talk about how the media coverage of Comey's firing is all overblown. Now, there have been inaccuracies and hyperbole, to be sure, but serious people understand, even if they won't say so on camera, that Trump has been throwing gasoline on a firestorm for no other reason than that that's what Trump does. I keep hearing from conservatives that the media is driven by a deranged conspiracy theory about the Trump campaign's collusion with Russia. Well, maybe it is, but I never hear the second shoe drop. Trump seems hell-bent on convincing people that he's obsessed with the Russia story and does almost everything he can to keep it alive. Trump's confession to NBC's Lester Holt that he fired Comey because of the Russia story, his ridiculous tweets, his letter claiming that Comey told him 3 times that he wasn't being investigated, these are not things you do if you want the media, the Democrats, Congress, or the FBI to drop the subject. A friend emailed Jonah Goldberg, week before last, that the Comey firestorm is only a big deal inside the Beltway. Well, mayhap it is, mayhap it isn't. But people forget that it's inside the Beltway where laws get made. The smart, never mind honorable response from conservatives to all this should be the Jerry Maguire response. Rather than rationalizing and enabling this behavior, conservatives should be doing everything they can to convince Trump that he's his own worst enemy. Mike Pence would do himself, his party, and his country a huge favor by telling Donald Trump something like this: "If you humiliate me like that again, I will resign and run against you in 2020. May not work. I'm sure it wouldn't work. But it's a far better approach than bending over and shouting, 'Thank you, sir. May I have another?' And here is a postscript, an epilogue to this trilogy. My absolute favorite tidbit this week before last, came with the news that Donald Trump has sent Lindsey Graham a certified letter to clear up the whole Russia business. From Trump's interview with Lester Holt, quote, and yes, I've said the same quote several times, but we will repeat it once more. I have a certified letter. Just so you understand, I'm not just saying that. I've given the letter to Senator Lindsey Graham. He has the letter, and I think, frankly, I assume he's going to give the letter out, but it says, I am not involved in Russia. Close quote. Now, maybe this is a stretch, but to my ear, this sounds like a classic example of the sort of flim-flammery common to condo salesmen. A certified letter just sounds so much more serious, doesn't it? I'm sending you a certified letter saying you owe me the rest of the down payment. You hear me? It's certified, so you better pay up or get yourself a lawyer. As though being a certified letter certifies the veracity of the enclosed contents. If you go to the post office's website, you'll learn that a certified letter is actually a trademark of the United States Postal Service. Here's the direct quote. Certified mail. Prove you sent it. See when it was delivered or that a delivery attempt was made, and get the signature of the person who accepts the mailing when combined with return receipt. In other words, a certified letter isn't quite nothing, but it is the wispy vapor nothing. If Lindsey Graham signs for the letter, that doesn't oblige him to believe whatever is in the envelope. You know, I have to wonder if Trump saw Miracle on 34th Street one too many times. In that movie, Kris Kringle's lawyer uses the fact that the post office delivered a bunch of kids' Santa letters to his client to prove that he is the one and only Santa Claus. The trial court goes along with it because the judge is looking for any excuse to avoid telling a politically suicidal truth. He doesn't want to have to declare at Christmas time, no less, that there is no Santa Claus. We're in a similar situation here. I don't know if Trump colluded with the Russians, but my hunch is that if there's any there, it will end with Manafort, Stone, and Page. Jasmius Echo syndrome strikes again. Similarly, I suspect Trump's business ties to Russia are more than he claims, but that they are probably tangential to the campaign. That's all beside the point, however. Trump is using an old bullshitter's technique to make it sound as if his letter is authoritative. And I'm sure some people believe it. Did you hear that, Marge? He's sending a certified letter to Lindsey Graham. It must be true. But in reality, all Trump is doing is using the letter's certified status like a tin can of his bullshit. And as we already know, there is a market for that kind of thing.